The night was drenched in the pale silver of the full moon, its light spilling across the courtyard of Windvale Keep. Every wolf in the northern pack had gathered, their eyes gleaming with curiosity and tension. At the center stood Ilara Thorn, daughter of the late Beta, her long braid loose from the evening wind, her bare feet touching the cold stones. She felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing against her skin. Alpha Rowan's voice cut through the stillness. "Ilara Thorn," he declared, his tone sharp as steel. "By decree of the Moon Council and the law of the Pacts, I claim you as my Luna. Step forward, and the bond will be sealed before the dawn." A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. For generations, no wolf had dared refuse an Alpha's claim. It was law, custom, and expectation woven into the fabric of their world. Yet Ilara's heart pounded not with surrender, but with defiance. She raised her chin, meeting Rowan's amber eyes. "I will not be your Luna," she said. Gasps broke the silence like shattering glass. The elders whispered in disbelief, and the younger wolves looked between them, unsure whether to be horrified or awed. Rowan's jaw tightened. "You defy me? You defy the moon itself?" "I defy the notion that a woman's will is lesser than an Alpha's command," Ilara answered. Her voice trembled, but not with fear. "The moon gave us instincts, not chains." "You seek obedience, not partnership." Rowan's expression darkened. "Careful, Ilara, words like that can be called treason." "Then let them call it what they will," she said quietly. "I would rather be exiled than bound to a man who sees me as a conquest." A hush fell over the courtyard. Even the night breeze seemed to hold its breath. The council elder stepped forward, his robes trailing like shadows. "By the law of the Pacts, refusal of an Alpha's claim is rebellion. The punishment is exile beyond the Blackwood border." Ilara's stomach tightened. She had expected this. Still, the reality of it, the loss of her home, her people, everything her father had built, pressed against her chest like a blade. Rowan's tone softened only slightly. "I offer you one last chance. Step forward, accept your place, and your father's name will remain honored among us." Ilara met his gaze. "My father taught me honor is not found in submission." The crowd stirred uneasily. Rowan gave a sharp nod. "Then you choose your fate." He gestured to 2 guards. "Escort her to the border before sunrise." The guards approached, their faces heavy with pity. As they led her through the gates, Ilara looked once more at the keep, its torches flickering like dying stars against the black sky. The wind carried the faint howls of the pack behind her, a song of judgment and loss. Her mind was a storm of thoughts, grief, pride, fear, but beneath them all pulsed something fierce and untamed, freedom. Just as the forest swallowed her, hoofbeats echoed behind. A royal courier rode fast through the gate, his cloak marked with the sigil of the Alpha King. The guards halted, exchanging uncertain glances. The rider dismounted and handed a sealed letter to the elder. The wax bore the king's emblem, a crescent moon crossed by a wolf's claw. The elder's eyes widened. "By royal decree," he read, voice quivering, "Ilara Thorn is to be brought before His Majesty at Lunaris Keep, immediately." Ilara froze. The Alpha King? No one summoned common wolves, let alone exiles. What could he want from her? Rowan's face twisted with frustration, but the law was clear. The king's command overruled all others. As the guards turned back toward her, she stood beneath the moon, torn between dread and curiosity. Whatever awaited her in Lunaris, she knew one thing with certainty. Her story was not ending in exile, it was only beginning. If you're drawn into Ilara's fate beneath the moonlight, make sure to join our pack. Subscribe before her journey begins. The forest stretched endlessly before her, its ancient trees whispering secrets through the wind. Ilara Thorn moved carefully beneath the tangled canopy, each breath clouding in the cold air. The moon had vanished behind thick clouds, leaving her in darkness. She had been walking for hours, guided only by the memory of stars and the faint scent of the northern pines. Her exile had begun with fire in her heart, but now exhaustion crept in. The sharp sting of hunger twisted her stomach. Wolves survived by instinct, yet she was alone, cut off from the pack's protection. from the comfort of shared howls and warmth. The silence pressed heavily against her ears. She found a stream glimmering faintly under the half-light and knelt beside it. The water was icy, biting against her lips, but it gave her strength. When she looked at her reflection, she saw a stranger staring back, a young woman with mud on her cheeks and eyes filled with quiet fury. "You wanted freedom," she reminded herself. "Now claim it." A rustle came from the shadows behind her. Ilara froze. The air shifted. The smell of blood, faint but fresh, reached her nose. She turned slowly, her senses sharpening. From between the trees stumbled a figure, a man, or rather a wolf in human form, his chest streaked with dried blood. He collapsed near the stream with a heavy groan. Ilara hesitated only a moment before approaching. "Who are you?" The stranger's eyes flickered open, grey, clouded with pain. "Don't come closer," he rasped. "They'll follow the scent." "Who?" "Hunters," he whispered. "Rogues." Ilara glanced into the dark, her instincts flaring. She could smell them now. Feral wolves, ones without pack or honor. She crouched beside the wounded man, her voice low. "If you can move, we must go." "Now." He gave a weak laugh. "You sound like someone who commands alphas." "Only when they're bleeding out," she muttered, slipping an arm beneath his shoulders. Together they stumbled through the underbrush until they found a hollow between two fallen trees. There Ilara worked quickly, tearing a strip from her cloak to bind his wound. He watched her silently, his breathing ragged. "You're not from these woods," he said finally. "No," she replied. "Exiled." He raised an eyebrow. "What crime?" "Defiance." A faint smirk touched his lips. "Then we share a talent." They fell quiet, listening to the night. Distant howls echoed through the forest, low, hungry, and closing in. Ilara's pulse quickened. "You said they were following?" "Yes," he murmured, eyes flicking toward the dark. "But they don't hunt alone, their alpha is near." Ilara clenched her jaw. She was unarmed except for a small blade hidden in her boot. "Can you shift?" "Not tonight," he said. "Silver wound." Her mind raced. She had been raised to fight with strategy, not strength. "Then I'll distract them," she decided. Before he could argue, she stepped into the open. The first rogue emerged moments later, eyes glowing pale gold, teeth glinting. "Look what we have here," he snarled. "A lost little wolf." Ilara didn't flinch. "Turn back, or I'll make you regret it." He laughed. "You're alone." "Not as alone as you think." From the shadows behind her came a low growl. The wounded man, barely standing but transformed, his wolf form trembling yet fierce. Together they faced the rogues. The standoff lasted seconds before the attackers hesitated, realizing they had underestimated them. The pack scattered into the dark, unwilling to challenge a bonded pair, even a weak one. When silence returned, Ilara turned to the man. "You shouldn't have shifted." He smiled faintly. "Neither should you have stayed." They shared a breath of uneasy peace. She offered her hand. "Then we'll call it even." He took it. "Lucan," he said quietly. "Former beta of the Iron Fangs." "Ilara," she replied. "Former daughter of Windvale." As dawn began to creep through the branches, she felt something strange. A sense that her exile had not stripped her of belonging, but had merely led her to a new beginning. Yet in the cold morning light, she could not shake the feeling that their meeting was no coincidence at all. Days passed beneath the heavy canopy of the forest, and the silence between Ilara and Lucan grew into something almost companionable. They had built a fragile shelter from fallen branches and woven leaves, a refuge that smelled of smoke and pine. Ilara hunted small game while Lucan's wound healed slowly, though his strength had not yet returned. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his voice carried the calm authority of one who had commanded before. "Wolves without packs are ghosts," he said one morning as she returned with a handful of berries. "They wander until hunger takes them." "Then I suppose we're both ghosts," she replied. "But at least we haunt together." He almost smiled. When the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke, Ilara paused. "Someone's near," she whispered. They crept toward the sound and found a group of travelers gathered around a fire at the edge of the old trade road, 3 merchants and a pair of guards warming their hands. They kept to the shadows, listening. The youngest merchant spoke first, his tone eager. "Did you hear? The Alpha King himself sent riders north. He's searching for someone." "The king?" another asked. "What for? There's war brewing in the south." "No," the young man said, lowering his voice. "It's about that woman from Windvale, the one who defied her Alpha. They say the king wants her brought to Lunaris Keep." Ilara's breath caught in her throat. Lucan glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Why would the king care about a banished she-wolf?" a guard scoffed. "Sounds like gossip." "Not gossip," the merchant insisted. "A courier passed through Davenford last night. Said the order came with the royal seal. The king's searching the borderlands himself." A hush fell over the group. The fire crackled, spitting sparks into the dark. Ilara stepped back into the forest, her pulse racing. Lucan followed her. "So the stories have already reached them," he said quietly. "You're a legend now." "I didn't ask to be one." "No one ever does." They returned to their camp in silence. The news sat heavy between them. Ilara stared into the small fire, her thoughts twisting. "The Alpha King wants me. Why?" Her mind returned to her father's stories. The king who ruled all packs from the citadel of Lunaris, a wolf born beneath an eclipse, said to be blessed by the moon itself. He was known for wisdom and for ruthlessness, for breaking rebellions and rebuilding alliances. He had never shown mercy to traitors. Lucan broke the quiet. "You should keep moving. If the royal scouts are searching, they'll find you here." "And what of you?" "I'm not their concern." Ilara looked at him. "You think I'll leave you behind?" "I think you should survive," he said simply. "Your defiance has already stirred the packs. Maybe the king fears what it could become." She met his gaze. "Or maybe he fears what he doesn't understand." Lucan tilted his head, studying her. "You sound like someone ready to challenge a crown." "I only ever wanted to challenge a cage." That night, sleep eluded her. The forest hummed softly with the life of unseen creatures. Each sound, the rustle of leaves, the hoot of an owl, seemed to whisper her name. When she finally closed her eyes, she dreamed of the moon turning crimson and a voice calling from the darkness. "Come to me, Ilara Thorn." She woke at dawn, breathless, the echo of that voice still lingering. Lucan was already awake, sharpening a blade with steady hands. "You dreamed," he said, not looking up. "Yes," she answered. "And I think the king is closer than we realize." He met her eyes then, grey as storm clouds. "Then we should decide. Will you run from him or toward him?" Ilara didn't answer, but deep within, a strange certainty had begun to form. The Alpha King's search was not a hunt, it was a summons, and though fear burned through her, curiosity burned brighter. Whatever awaited her beyond the trees, she would not hide from it, not anymore. By the third dawn after the merchant's whispers, Ilara sensed the shift in the air. The forest no longer felt like a sanctuary. The birds had grown silent, and the faint metallic scent of armor carried through the wind. Lucan noticed it too. He rose from the fire, his hand resting near his blade. "They've found us," he said. Ilara's chest tightened. "The rogues?" He shook his head. "No, Royal Patrol." Moments later, the sound of hooves echoed through the valley. From between the trees emerged riders clad in dark leather and polished steel, their insignia bearing the crescent moon of the Alpha King. They surrounded the clearing in a disciplined arc. The lead rider dismounted, a tall woman with amber eyes and a scar running from her temple to her jaw. Her presence radiated command. "Ilara Thorn of Windvale?" she called. Ilara stepped forward. "I am she." The woman drew a scroll from her belt and broke the seal. "By decree of His Majesty, King Cale Draven of Lunaris, you are commanded to appear before the royal court to answer for defiance against Alpha law." Lucan took a step closer. "She's done nothing to warrant chains." The commander's gaze flicked to him. "And you are?" "No one important." Then stay that way, she replied sharply. Her tone softened slightly when she turned back to Ilara. You may come willingly or by force. The king's orders are not a suggestion. Ilara's mind raced. The royal summons was both an honor and a trap. No wolf refused a direct command from the king and lived to tell of it. Yet if she went, she would walk straight into the heart of power. The same power that upheld the laws that had cast her out. What does the king want with me? She asked. The commander's expression did not change. He did not say. Lucan placed a hand on her arm. Ilara, you don't owe them your submission. I owe myself answers, she said quietly. The commander nodded once, as if acknowledging courage where she expected fear. You will ride with us, your companion stays. No, Ilara said firmly. He comes. That's not for you to decide. Then tell your king he can wait, Ilara replied, her voice steady. The silence that followed was tense. Finally, the commander sighed. Very well. The king will judge both, if necessary. They rode through the day beneath a pale sun that struggled to pierce the mist. Ilara felt the eyes of the soldiers on her, measuring her, perhaps wondering what kind of woman defied an alpha, and still walked unbound. Lucan rode beside her, his posture rigid but protective. When dusk fell, they reached the ridge overlooking the valley of the Silver Run. In the distance, faint lights shimmered like stars upon the horizon, the outpost marking the edge of royal territory. Ilara broke the silence. You've seen the king? She asked the commander. Once, the woman replied. He doesn't waste words, but when he speaks, every wolf listens. Does he believe in the laws he enforces? The commander hesitated. He believes in order. Whether that means justice depends on who's standing before him. Ilara let the words settle. The king's reputation had reached even the farthest packs, a ruler who balanced mercy with might, who demanded loyalty yet punished cruelty without hesitation. But none of that explained why he wanted her. As the night deepened, they stopped beside a stream. The soldiers built a small fire while others kept watch. Ilara sat apart, staring into the water, her reflection rippling in the current. Lucan crouched beside her. You still have time to run, he said quietly, and leave what unanswered. He studied her face, then looked away. You're either brave or doomed. Maybe both, she said. When the commander announced they would reach Lunaris within 2 days, Ilara turned her gaze toward the dark horizon. Somewhere beyond the distant mountains, the Alpha King waited. Whether he sought to punish her or something far more dangerous, she would soon discover. But as the moon rose over the silent camp, Ilara felt a strange pull in her chest, a force older than law, older even than the blood of wolves. It whispered a single truth. Her fate was already moving toward his. The road to Lunaris wound through valleys blanketed in mist, the air thick with the scent of rain and stone. For 2 days, Ilara rode in silence, her thoughts turning endlessly around the question that haunted her. Why had the king summoned her? Each mile brought her closer to an answer she both feared and needed to face. By dusk on the 3rd day, the walls of Lunaris Keep rose from the horizon. Built upon a cliff of pale granite, it shimmered beneath the moon like a fortress carved from light itself. Towers speared the clouds, and the howl of wolves echoed faintly from the surrounding hills. Even Lucan, hardened by years of wandering, looked upon it with awe. Now I understand why they call it the heart of the packs, he murmured. The commander, riding ahead, glanced back. Remember that awe when you stand before the king. He does not forgive arrogance. Ilara said nothing, though her heart beat faster. The gates opened with a deep groan, revealing streets lined with banners of silver and black. The scent of the city was unfamiliar, iron incense and the faint trace of blood from the training grounds. They dismounted before the great hall. Guards flanked the entrance, their armor gleaming. As Ilara stepped forward, whispers rippled through the gathered crowd. The defiant one, the Alpha's exile, the woman who refused the bond. She felt their eyes like thorns on her skin, but kept her head high. Inside, the hall stretched vast and cold, its walls carved with runes that shimmered faintly under torchlight. At its center stood the moonstone throne, a seat of polished crystal that caught every flicker of flame, and upon it sat the Alpha King, Kyle Draven. He was not what she expected. He looked younger than the stories suggested, though the weight of authority clung to him like a second skin. His hair was dark as midnight, his eyes a strange silver that seemed to see through everything they touched. Power radiated from him, not loud or cruel, but steady like the tide. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, yet it carried easily through the hall. Elara Thorne. She bowed slightly, though her movements were cautious, guarded. Your Majesty. Kyle studied her for a long moment before saying, You refused your Alpha's claim. I did. Do you understand the weight of that refusal? I understand that obedience without choice is not loyalty, she said, and that strength is not submission. A murmur swept through the council standing nearby. The king's expression did not change. So you speak boldly for one who stands accused. Elara met his gaze. Then tell me what I am accused of, defiance or freedom. Kyle's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something that hinted at interest. Perhaps both. Lucan, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. Your Majesty, The king lifted a hand. You may speak when spoken to, Beta. Lucan bowed his head, jaw tightening. Kale rose from the throne and descended the steps, his presence filling the space between them. You intrigue me, Elara Thorne. Few wolves would stand before the Moonstone throne and speak so plainly. I was taught to honor truth above fear, she replied softly, and yet fear is what keeps packs united. His gaze sharpened. Without it, chaos reigns. Or freedom, she countered. The silence that followed was thick, charged with something neither could name. For the first time, Elara felt the pull of the power that surrounded him. An ancient force, heavy and magnetic. He was everything she despised about control, and yet something in his restraint unsettled her. Finally, Kale turned to the council. The matter of Elara Thorne will not be decided today. She will remain within the keep until judgment is given. The commander bowed. As you command, my king. Kyle looked at Elara one last time. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, your trial begins. As the guards led her from the hall, Elara's pulse thrummed with confusion and defiance. She had come expecting condemnation, perhaps even death. Instead, she had found a king who looked at her not as a criminal, but as a challenge. And challenges, she knew, could change the course of kingdoms. The dawn in Lunaris came grey and cold, spreading through the courtyard like a warning. Elara stood beneath the watchful eyes of the royal guards, her wrists unbound yet surrounded by invisible chains of scrutiny. The hum of whispers rippled across the gathered council members who waited for the trial to begin. Lucan stood apart, silent, forced into the crowd with the other witnesses. King Kale entered last, his steps measured and deliberate. The air seemed to shift with his presence, and even the murmurs of the court fell away. He stopped at the base of the Moonstone dais, his silver eyes fixed on Elara. Elara Thorne, he began, his tone clear, calm, but edged with authority. You stand accused of violating the sacred command of the Alpha Bond. You refused your Alpha's claim, defied the law of the Pax, and incited rebellion against the natural order. How do you answer these charges? I do not deny what I've done, Elara said, her voice steady. But I deny that obedience is sacred when it serves tyranny. The council members stirred in disapproval. One of the elder advisors, a wolf with snow-white hair and a scar over his eye, rose to speak. Your Majesty, this is precisely the poison that must be purged. If we allow such defiance to go unpunished, every pack will unravel. Kale did not respond immediately. He studied Elara, his expression unreadable. And what would you suggest, Elder Corvin? The punishment for rebellion has always been the same, banishment or death. A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Kyle raised a hand, silencing them. Tradition has its place, but blind adherence is not justice. He turned his gaze to Elara. Tell me, Elara Thorne, why did you refuse your Alpha's claim? Her heart pounded, but she met his eyes without wavering. Because I am not a possession. Because a bond without choice is a cage. My father taught me that the strength of a pack lies in respect, not dominance. You speak as though equality can exist among wolves, Kyle said. I speak as though it should. The faintest flicker of something, amusement, perhaps admiration, crossed his face. Then perhaps your punishment should reflect your conviction. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Kyle turned to address the court. Ilara Thorne will not be executed nor banished. Instead, she will serve in the royal pack for one full moon cycle. During this time, she will obey the laws of the king and the hierarchy of the keep. If she succeeds, her record will be absolved. If she fails, then exile will become permanent. Elder Corvin's voice rose sharply. Your Majesty, such leniency invites defiance. What lesson will others learn? Kyle's tone turned to ice. They will learn that strength is tested by endurance, not cruelty. The elder bowed his head but said no more. Lucan stepped forward, ignoring the warning glare of the guards. Your Majesty, if she's to serve in the royal pack, I request permission to remain as her second. She saved my life, my loyalty is hers. Kyle regarded him for a long moment. You would tie your fate to hers so easily? I already have, Lucan replied. Then so be it, Kyle said. You both serve under my command. You will be tested, watched, and judged by your actions. He turned to Ilara again. Understand this, Ilara Thorne. The royal pack is not a refuge. It is the beating heart of the kingdom. Fail to respect its pulse, and it will crush you. Ilara inclined her head. Then I will learn its rhythm. Kyle studied her a moment longer, then dismissed the assembly. The guard stepped forward to escort her from the hall. As she passed, the court parted in uneasy silence. Lucan caught her eye briefly, his look filled with both warning and faith. And though uncertainty coiled within her, Ilara felt something awaken, a fire not born of defiance, but of resolve. Her trial had begun, not in chains or blood, but in choice. And for the first time since exile, she sensed the faint outline of destiny taking shape in the shadows of Lunaris Keep. The royal training grounds smelled of steel, sweat, and moonlit soil. Ilara stood at its edge, her heart steady but her mind alert. Around her, members of the royal pack moved with sharp precision, their movements graceful as predators, yet bound by discipline. These were the strongest wolves in the kingdom, the king's chosen. She could feel their stares, cold and assessing, as though measuring whether she belonged among them. A woman approached first, tall and poised, her hair bound in a silver braid that gleamed beneath the rising sun. You must be the infamous Ilara Thorne, she said, her tone cool but not unkind. I'm Lady Ceres, the king's advisor. I oversee the royal pack when His Majesty cannot. Ilara inclined her head slightly. Then you oversee nearly everything, I imagine. A faint smile touched Ceres's lips. Perceptive. That might keep you alive. Her eyes drifted toward Lucan, who stood a few paces behind. And your companion, what should I call him? Lucan will do, he said, his voice firm. Ceres nodded, then turned back to Ilara. You'll train at dawn, serve in the keep by day, and attend the council's observation meetings each evening. Fail in any of these and your trial ends. Ilara met her gaze. I didn't come here to fail. Good. Then learn quickly. The rest of the morning passed in grueling motion. Ilara was tested not only in strength, but in obedience. Every order carried a weight, every hesitation drew suspicion. When one of the warriors, Commander Aedric, ordered her to spar, she hesitated only long enough to read his stance before striking. He blocked, testing her reflexes, his grin sharp. You fight like someone who doesn't know when to yield, he said. Maybe that's because I don't. Their clash drew attention, the echo of blows ringing across the yard. When Aedric finally disarmed her, he nodded in approval. You've got fire, that'll serve you well if it doesn't burn you first. By midday, her arms ached, but she refused to show fatigue. She'd lived through exile. She could endure this. Still, she could feel the unspoken tension. The others regarded her as an outsider, a disruption to order. When the bell tolled for the noon meal, whispers followed her into the hall. Lucan sat beside her, breaking the silence. You made an impression, he said quietly. Good or bad? Depends on whether the king values trouble. She almost smiled. Then I suppose we'll find out soon. Later that afternoon, Lady Ceres summoned her to the archives. The chamber smelled of parchment and candle smoke, its walls lined with scrolls chronicling centuries of pack lore. Ceres handed her one such scroll. "Read it," she said. Ilara unrolled it and scanned the text. It detailed the founding of the Alpha Kingdom, the pact made under the first moon between wolves and the Celestial Order. Every line glorified obedience, hierarchy, and male rule. When she looked up, her expression was unreadable. "You wanted me to learn this?" "I wanted you to understand the roots of what you're fighting," Ceres said softly. "You think the king is your enemy. You might be wrong." Ilara frowned. "Then what is he?" Ceres regarded her with something like pity. A man trying to hold a kingdom built on chains. And perhaps looking for a way to break them. The words lingered long after Ilara left. That evening, as she stood on the balcony overlooking the courtyard, the moon rising above the distant mountains, she caught sight of Kale in the training yard below. He moved with quiet strength, sparring alone, his strikes precise and deliberate. For the first time, she saw not a ruler cloaked in authority, but a man bound by expectation. The realization unsettled her more than she wished to admit. Lucan's voice came from behind her. "Careful, Ilara. The higher you climb, the thinner the air." She didn't turn. "And then I'll learn to breathe differently." And as the night deepened, the tension between defiance and duty grew sharper, weaving her fate ever tighter into the heart of Lunaris Keep. The days at Lunaris Keep passed in quiet rigor, each one blurring into the next. Ilara had learned the rhythm of the royal pack, their discipline, their loyalty, their silence. Yet beneath that order, something darker pulsed, a current of tension she could not ignore. The whispers that followed her no longer felt like simple curiosity. They carried weight, intent, and fear. One evening after the day's training, she walked through the corridor that led to the lower archives. The air was cold there, the walls damp with age. She had come seeking solitude, but instead, she heard voices echoing softly from the chamber ahead. She paused in the shadows, listening. "The council grows impatient," a man's voice said. It was low, clipped, and filled with disdain. "And the king?" another replied. "Does he still believe this girl's defiance holds meaning?" Ilara's breath caught. "The king's mercy blinds him," the first voice continued. "He forgets that mercy is weakness. The Packs remember Wynvale. They remember her father's death. If the council turns, the throne will not stand." Silence followed, then the scrape of boots on stone. Ilara pressed back into the alcove as two figures passed, Elder Corvin and Commander Adric. Their faces were grim, their words colder still. When they disappeared down the hall, she exhaled slowly. Whatever loyalty bound the king's court together was fraying, and she had stumbled upon its edge. Later that night, she found Lucan near the stables, sharpening his sword by lantern light. "You look like someone who's seen a ghost," he said without glancing up. "I heard the council speaking," she replied. "They question the king's rule." "They speak of betrayal." Lucan set the blade aside. "Betrayal is an old game in royal halls. The question is, who's playing it this time? Elder Corvin, maybe Adric too." His brows furrowed. "Careful. Adric's dangerous, but not foolish. He wouldn't move without reason. Then maybe someone's giving him one." Lucan studied her, his expression unreadable. "You think they're plotting against Kale?" "I think they fear what he's becoming." He leaned back, the light catching the edge of his scar. "And what is that?" "A man who listens to voices like mine." The words hung between them. Lucan gave a quiet laugh. "Then you've already changed more than you know." Before she could reply, the stable doors creaked open. Lady Ceres entered, her steps deliberate, her gaze sharp as ever. "You shouldn't speak of treason in the open," she said softly. "The walls here have ears." "You knew?" Ilara asked. "I know enough," Ceres replied. "And so does the king. He trusts you're not a fool, though I'm beginning to doubt his optimism." Ilara stiffened. "If you think I'm a threat, say it." Ceres's eyes softened slightly. I don't think you're a threat, Ilara. I think you're a catalyst, and catalysts don't choose when to ignite. What do you want from me? To keep your eyes open, and your tongue still. She turned to leave, but paused at the door. Whatever you heard tonight, remember it, but don't act on it, not yet. When she was gone, Ilara sat in silence, the weight of the warning pressing against her chest. She had come to the keep to survive her trial, to prove herself worthy of freedom. But now survival felt too small a goal. Something greater was unraveling, and she stood in its center. That night, sleep refused to claim her. She walked the corridors until she found herself before the great hall once more. The moonstone throne gleamed faintly in the dark, empty and still. She could almost feel Kael's presence lingering there, the pull of his power, the burden of his crown. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if he too sensed the shadows closing in. And as the moonlight spilled across the floor, Ilara made a silent vow. If the darkness threatened to consume the king, she would face it first, even if it meant stepping into it herself. The next morning broke over Lunaris Keep in muted gold, the kind of light that made everything appear softer than it was. But beneath the calm, the air carried tension. Rumors had begun to stir, quiet, persistent whispers about unrest within the royal court. Ilara could feel it in every guarded glance and hushed conversation, the sense that something was about to fracture. She spent the morning training alone in the inner courtyard, striking against wooden dummies until her hands ached. The rhythm steadied her thoughts, but not enough to silence them. When the final bell of the morning sounded, she turned to find Kael standing at the edge of the yard. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "You fight as if you're trying to silence something inside you." Ilara lowered her weapon. "Maybe I am." Kael stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "I've seen warriors break themselves on the idea of control. You're not here to prove you're stronger than the world, Ilara. You're here to see if the world can change because of you." She met his gaze, cautious but curious. "And you think it can?" "I wouldn't have summoned you otherwise." The words caught her off guard. She had spent weeks wondering why he'd called her to Lunaris, whether it was punishment, curiosity, or politics. But hearing him say it that way, as if her defiance had meaning, unsettled her more than any threat could. Kael gestured for her to follow him, and together they walked toward the northern parapet. The view stretched endlessly, the mountains cutting across the horizon like silver scars. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and snow. "When I was young," Kael said quietly, "I believed in the laws I was born to uphold. My father taught me that power kept wolves safe, that fear preserved peace. But I've begun to wonder if we mistook obedience for harmony." Ilara studied him. "So you summoned me to test your doubts, to test whether courage still exists," he replied, "the kind that doesn't need strength to command it." She turned away, her heart quickening despite herself. "I didn't come here to inspire kings." "No," he said softly. "You came here to survive them." The honesty in his voice startled her. For a long moment they stood in silence, the only sound the wind moving through the stone archways. Then Kael drew a dagger from his belt, not in threat, but in ritual. The blade gleamed beneath the sunlight. "Do you know the meaning of the moon oath?" he asked. "I know it binds wolves for life," she said. "It's the vow alphas use to claim loyalty." "It was once more than that," Kael said. "Before the laws of dominance, the oath was sacred. It bound not out of control, but trust. Two wolves standing beneath the same moon, promising not obedience, but truth." He turned the dagger in his hand and sliced a shallow line across his palm. "A vow made in blood cannot be broken." Ilara's pulse quickened. "And what vow do you mean to make, Your Majesty?" Kael's voice lowered. "That I will not rule by fear, that I will listen to the wolves who dare speak against it." He looked at her. "And that I will trust you, even if it costs me everything." For a moment, the world stilled. Ilara stared at him, her thoughts tangled between suspicion and something dangerously close to belief. Slowly she reached for the dagger, drew it across her own palm and pressed her hand against his. Their blood mingled, warm, red, and alive. The contact sent a pulse through her chest, a flicker of energy that felt older than the world itself. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. "Then hear my vow, Caeldraven. I will not betray the truth I've spoken, even if it destroys me." Kyle's eyes held hers, silver and unyielding. "Then the moon has witnessed us both." The wind rose, carrying their mingled scent into the distance. Ilara pulled her hand away first, her heartbeat uneven. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "The council won't forgive this," he said quietly. "They'll see it as a bond." "Then let them," she answered, not looking back. "We both knew something would break before this was over." And as she walked away, the oath they had forged beneath the sun felt heavier than chains, and far more dangerous. The festival of the twin moons filled Lunaris Keep with light and song. Banners fluttered from the walls, and the scent of roasted meat and honeyed wine drifted through the courtyards. For one night each year, rank and duty were set aside, and the wolves of every pack danced beneath the silver sky. Yet beneath the laughter, unease stirred like a hidden storm. Ilara felt it in the air, a stillness that didn't belong. She stood at the edge of the great hall, watching the crowd swirl around her. Lucan joined her side, a goblet in hand. "You look like someone waiting for the sky to fall," he said. "Maybe I am," she replied quietly. "Something feels wrong tonight." Lucan scanned the hall. "You think it's the council?" "I think it's everyone," she said. Too many smiles that don't reach their eyes. Across the room, Kyle spoke with the elders, his expression calm but distant. He carried himself with the weight of command, but Ilara noticed the strain in his shoulders. Since their oath, he had been more guarded, as if he knew what it had cost him. The music shifted to a slower rhythm. Adric, the commander, approached with 2 guards. His grin was sharp. "Lady Ilara," he said smoothly, "the king requests your presence." Ilara's pulse tightened. "Now?" "The moon doesn't wait for dawn," he replied. Lucan moved to follow, but Adric raised a hand. "The king asked for her alone." Ilara hesitated, but Cale's distant gaze caught hers across the hall, and with a nod, she followed Adric through the marble corridors. The noise of celebration faded behind them. The air grew colder, heavier. They stopped before the council chamber. Adric opened the door and gestured for her to enter. When she stepped inside, her breath caught. Kyle stood by the long table, his expression unreadable. But around him, the council members gathered like vultures. Elder Corvin held a parchment in his hands. Cale's voice was quiet, but every syllable cut. "Ilara Thorne, you are accused of treason against the crown." For a heartbeat, she couldn't move. "What?" Corvin stepped forward, unrolling the parchment. "A letter was found in your quarters, bearing your seal and your hand. It speaks of the king's weakness, of a plan to overthrow him and take control of the royal pack." "That's a lie," she said sharply. "I've written no such letter." Adric's smirk widened. "Then explain how it came to rest beneath your bed, sealed in your name." Ilara turned to Kyle. "You don't believe this." His gaze met hers, steady but cold. "Where there is fire, there is often smoke." "Then look closer," she said, anger rising. "The smoke isn't mine." Corvin's tone grew sharper. "You defied an alpha once. Are we to believe you wouldn't defy a king?" Lucan burst through the doorway then, breathless, his sword half drawn. "This is a setup," he shouted. "I saw Adric near her chambers earlier." "Enough," Kyle said, his command echoing like thunder. The room fell silent. "Lucan, you speak without proof. Adric has served me for years." "Years of silence doesn't make loyalty," Lucan shot back. Kyle's jaw tightened. "Guards, remove him." As they dragged Lucan out, Ilara felt something inside her splinter. "If you let them do this," she said to Kyle, her voice low and trembling, "you're proving their point. You're letting fear rule you." Kyle's eyes flickered, not anger, but something deeper, regret perhaps. "Until I know the truth, you will remain confined to the Moonstone Tower." "Confinement won't change the truth," she said bitterly. "No," he answered. "But it will keep you alive." The guard stepped forward, taking her by the arms. As they led her away, the festival music resumed outside. a cruel echo of joy over betrayal. Ilara didn't fight. Her body moved, but her mind was already elsewhere, turning over every word, every glance, every whisper. Somewhere in the shadows of Lunaris Keep, someone had played a dangerous hand. And though she had been cast as the traitor, she vowed one thing as the tower doors closed behind her. The true betrayer would soon be unmasked, and when they were, the moon itself would bear witness. The Moonstone Tower stood apart from the rest of Lunaris Keep, its pale walls gleaming faintly under the night sky. Ilara had once looked upon it as a symbol of justice, the place where kings communed with the moon for guidance. Now, confined within its highest chamber, she understood its truer purpose. It was a monument to isolation. Days bled into one another. The chamber held nothing but a narrow bed, a single window, and the silence. The guards brought food twice a day and left without a word. The quiet became her only company, pressing against her mind like a weight. Yet even in captivity, her thoughts refused to surrender. She replayed every moment of the betrayal, the letter, the accusations. Kyle's eyes shadowed with doubt. The memory of his voice echoed through her mind. "Until I know the truth, you will remain confined." He hadn't condemned her, but he hadn't trusted her either. At night she stood by the window, staring down at the distant lights of the courtyard. Below, the keep pulsed with movement, preparations for something she couldn't name. The council, perhaps, tightening their hold while the king's faith faltered. When the door creaked open one evening, she turned sharply. A familiar figure slipped inside, Lady Ceres, cloaked in grey, her expression grave. "You shouldn't be here," Ilara said. Ceres shut the door quietly. "Neither should you." Ilara crossed her arms. "You came to see the prisoner or the scapegoat?" "I came to see the woman who may be the only one left who can save him," Ceres said. Ilara's breath caught. "Kale." "The council moves faster than you think," Ceres whispered. "Elder Corvin has called for a vote. They mean to strip the king of his authority, to replace him with someone who still believes in the old ways. And they'll use me to justify it," Ilara said bitterly. Ceres nodded. "They already are." Ilara felt the air thicken. "Then let me speak to him, let me defend myself." "They won't allow it," Ceres said. "He's already ordered your execution to be delayed, but the pressure grows." Ilara's voice trembled. "Then what do I do? Wait to die?" Ceres hesitated, then reached into her cloak, drawing a small silver key. "No, you escape." Ilara stared at it. "If I flee, they'll call it proof of guilt. If you stay, you'll give them what they need," Ceres replied. "The king won't survive the rebellion that follows." Ilara took the key slowly, the cold metal burning against her palm. "Why help me?" Ceres's expression softened. "Because I once believed loyalty meant silence. I was wrong." She paused. "There's someone waiting for you outside the walls. He'll know what to do." Ilara's heart tightened. "Lucan?" Ceres gave a faint smile. "He's been trying to reach you since the night of your arrest. I warned him not to, but he's never been good at listening." Ilara closed her fingers around the key. "Then I won't waste what you've risked." Ceres placed a hand on her shoulder. "The council meets by the next full moon. Whatever you discover, bring it before that night, or we lose everything." When she was gone, the silence returned, but it no longer felt suffocating. It felt purposeful. That night, Ilara waited until the guards changed shifts. The sound of their boots faded down the spiral stairs. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. The door opened. The corridor beyond was dark and cold, but freedom lay somewhere in that darkness. She stepped into it without hesitation. Every instinct told her this was only the beginning of a greater fight, one that would test not her defiance, but her faith. As she descended the winding stairs, a single thought burned in her mind. If the truth had been buried, she would dig it up herself, no matter how deep the moonlight had hidden it. The forest beyond the walls of Lunaris was colder than Ilara remembered. The night air cut through her lungs as she moved swiftly under the canopy, the path lit only by slivers of moonlight. Each step was measured, quiet, her heart pounding with the rhythm of pursuit. She didn't know how long she had before the guards discovered her escape, only that every moment counted. A rustle ahead made her stop. A voice whispered from the darkness. "You're late." "Lucan," she breathed. He stepped into the pale light, his clothes torn, his expression worn, but steady. "You're alive," he said, the relief in his voice barely masking his anger. "I told Ceres she was mad for helping you." "She was right," Ilara replied. "The Council's plotting something far worse than treason." Lucan's eyes narrowed. "Worse than betrayal? They mean to take the throne, and they'll use the chaos to crown a new ruler, one who obeys the old laws." Lucan's jaw tightened. "Rowan." The name hung between them like poison. "He's here," she said. "He's the one behind the forged letter, behind all of it." Lucan cursed softly. "Then the king—" "Doesn't know," Ilara finished. "Not yet. And if we don't stop Rowan tonight, he never will." They moved through the forest toward the outer ridge of the keep, where the torches burned faintly against the dark. From their vantage point they could see movement near the walls, soldiers gathering, banners without the royal crest. The coup had already begun. Lucan glanced at her. "We can't take them alone." "We don't need to," she said. "We just have to reach Kyle before they do." But fate had other plans. As they crossed the clearing, a familiar voice cut through the wind. "Ilara Thorne." "Running again?" Rowan stepped from the shadows, his armor gleaming black, a cruel smile on his lips. Behind him, a dozen armed wolves spread out, surrounding them. "You should have stayed in exile," he said. "I would have let the world forget you." Ilara stood her ground. "You never wanted the world to forget me. You wanted to own me." His eyes hardened. "And you wanted to defy everything our kind stands for. Now look where it's brought you, fleeing from chains you made yourself." Lucan moved closer, his voice low. "You forged that letter. You turned the king against her." Rowan smirked. "The king was easy. He's too busy questioning himself to see the dagger at his throat." Ilara's anger flared. "You'll destroy everything just to prove you were right." "I'll restore what was lost," Rowan snapped. "The packs need an alpha unafraid to lead. The king's weakness spreads like rot, and you—" He pointed at her. "You are the infection that began it." Ilara met his gaze, calm despite the fury rising in her chest. "Then I'll be the cure." He lunged forward, his sword flashing in the moonlight. Lucan intercepted him, steel clashing against steel. The wolves attacked, the clearing erupting in chaos. Ilara fought with instinct, her blade catching firelight, her body fueled by something more than fear, by purpose. She faced Rowan again, breathing hard. "You don't understand, do you? The old order is already dying." He struck again, but she sidestepped, his momentum carrying him forward. With a swift motion, she disarmed him, sending his sword spinning into the dirt. She held her blade at his throat but didn't strike. "Go on," he taunted. "Prove you're no different from me." Ilara's grip tightened, but she lowered the sword. "That's the difference," she said. "I don't kill to be obeyed." Before he could respond, the distant horns of Lunaris sounded, warning calls echoing through the valley. Rowan's eyes widened as realization struck. His plan had failed. Lucan approached, blood on his sleeve but resolve in his gaze. "The king knows." Rowan looked at them both, hatred and disbelief twisting his features. "You've doomed us all." "No," Ilara said quietly. "We've freed them." As the horns grew louder and the sound of approaching soldiers filled the night, Rowan fled into the forest's depths, his shadow swallowed by darkness. Ilara turned toward the keep, her heart pounding with dread and determination. "It isn't over," she whispered. Lucan nodded grimly. "No. It's just begun." Together they ran toward the rising light of the burning horizon, where the fate of the kingdom waited to be claimed. The fires of rebellion still smoldered across the valley when dawn touched the walls of Lunaris Keep. The night had left its scars, ash drifting through the air, the faint echo of horns fading into silence. Ilara stood at the edge of the courtyard, her body aching from battle. her heart heavy with what had been lost and what still remained unfinished. Lucan approached, his arm bound in cloth, streaked with soot and blood. "The king's men are reclaiming the walls," he said quietly. "Rowan's forces are retreating to the southern ridge. He won't risk another attack, not now." Elara nodded, but her gaze stayed fixed on the keep's upper tower, where the moonstone banners hung half-torn. "Kyle?" she asked. "He's alive," Lucan replied. "Wounded, but alive. He's been asking for you." For a moment, Elara couldn't move. She had faced exile, betrayal and battle, yet the thought of standing before him again, after everything, stirred something deeper than fear. She followed Lucan through the corridors, their steps echoing against the cold stone. The keep felt different now, quieter, as if the very walls were holding their breath. They found Kyle in the council chamber, sitting at the head of the long table. His armor was dented, his hand wrapped in bandages still stained with blood. The silver in his eyes had dulled with exhaustion, but when he saw her, something alive flickered there again. "Elara," he said softly. She stepped closer, unsure whether to bow or speak. "You shouldn't be standing," she said finally. "I've survived worse," he replied with a faint smile. "Though I admit, not by much." Lucan gave a respectful nod and left them alone. The heavy doors shut behind him, leaving only the two of them and the faint hum of the morning wind through the broken windows. Kyle looked down at his hands. "I was blind," he said quietly. "Rowan's treachery should have been clear, but I doubted the one person who told me the truth." Elara shook her head. "You believed what you had to. Trust is dangerous in a court built on fear. I built that court," he said bitterly, "and now it's cost me everything." She stepped closer, her voice softening. "Not everything." Kyle met her gaze, and the weight between them shifted. No longer ruler and subject, but something fragile and real. "The council will demand my abdication," he said. "They will claim my bloodline has weakened, that I no longer hold the authority of the moon." "Then defy them," she said, "the way I defied Rowan." He gave a quiet laugh. "And what would that make me? A king who rules through rebellion?" "It would make you human," she replied, "and perhaps that's what this kingdom needs." Silence filled the space between them. Then Kale reached for the chain around his neck and unclasped it, revealing the crescent medallion, the symbol of the Alpha King. He held it out to her. "This crown has been passed from wolf to wolf for centuries. Each bearer claimed it through dominance, blood, or inheritance, but none have earned it through choice." Elara's breath caught. "What are you saying? That I am offering you a place beside me, not as a Luna by law but by will? No one has ever stood before me as you have. No one has ever made me question what power truly means." She stared at the medallion, its surface glinting in the morning light. "And if I refuse?" "Then I will still honor you as the woman who changed me," he said quietly. "The kingdom will remember your name even if you walk away." For a long moment she said nothing. Her fingers brushed the medallion, cool against her skin. Freedom had been her fight from the beginning, and now, standing before the man who once held her fate, she realized it had never meant being alone. It meant choosing her own path. Finally she looked up, her voice calm but certain. "I'll stand beside you, Kyle, but not because you offered me a crown, because you offered me choice." Kyle exhaled slowly, relief softening the hard lines of his face. "Then let this be our new beginning." As the first rays of sunlight broke through the shattered windows, Elara understood that this was not surrender, it was transformation. For the first time, both King and Luna stood not as ruler and servant, but as equals beneath the same moon. The night of the full moon arrived, vast and silver, casting its cold light over Lunaris Keep. For the first time in generations, the Pax gathered not for war or obedience, but for judgment, The courtyard stretched before the Moonstone throne, filled with wolves from every territory, northern, southern, coastal, and mountain-born. Their voices hummed in anxious unity, an ocean of anticipation awaiting what was to come. Elara stood beside Kyle at the center of the gathering. The crown rested in his hands, not upon his head. Around them the council watched in tense silence, their robes dark as ash. Elder Corvin sat stiffly among them, his jaw tight with disapproval. Kyle's voice rose above the murmurs. For centuries, our laws have bound wolves to fear. We've called it order, we've called it balance, but it has chained us to the past. Tonight, that ends. His words rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, others shifted uneasily. Corvin rose to his feet. You speak of ending the laws that keep us united. Without them, the packs will turn on one another. Cale's gaze sharpened. We've lived long enough under the illusion that dominance is unity. It is submission, and submission breeds rebellion. He turned to Elara. This woman stood against that belief and was cast out for it, yet she returned, not seeking vengeance but truth. Her courage is the proof that freedom does not destroy us, it redeems us. Elara felt the crowd's eyes settle on her. Her pulse drummed in her throat. I was born believing the bond between Alpha and Luna was sacred, she began, her voice steady. But sacred things lose their meaning when they are forced. I refused not out of arrogance, but because I believed the moon gave us choice. And choice is the truest bond of all. A murmur swept through the crowd, soft at first, then louder, spreading like wildfire. Some shouted her name, others whispered prayers beneath their breath. Corvin's expression hardened. You ask us to abandon our ancestors' order, he said coldly, to let wolves choose their fate without command. That is chaos. No, Elara said, that is faith. The courtyard fell still. Even the wind seemed to listen. Kyle lifted the crown in both hands. From this night forth, he declared, no wolf shall be bound without consent. No Luna claimed without her will. The moon's gift was freedom, and we will honor it. Corvin's fury broke. You damn us all, he shouted. You undo centuries of law for the word of a defiant girl? Kyle stepped forward, his voice like thunder. For the word of a queen who reminded me what leadership means. Silence followed. Then one by one the wolves knelt, not in submission but in acknowledgement. Heads bowed to the king and the woman beside him. For the first time the bond between ruler and pack was not forged in fear, but in choice. Kyle turned to Elara. This kingdom was born from blood. Let it be reborn in truth. He placed the crown upon her head, not as a claim, but as a promise. Elara Thorne, Luna Queen of the New Moon. The crowd erupted. The howls that rose were not cries of obedience, but of awakening. The sound carried beyond the walls, across valleys and forests, echoing through the night until even the stars seemed to shiver. Elara looked up at the sky, the silver light washing over her face. For the first time she did not feel small beneath it. She felt infinite. Kyle's voice broke the silence between them. Do you regret it? Choosing this path? She smiled faintly. I regret nothing that was chosen freely. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining beneath the moonlight. Around them, the kingdom began to change, not through conquest, but through courage. And though the past still lingered like a shadow beneath that silver moon, a new world had begun to rise. The days following the decree were unlike anything Lunaris had ever known. The air felt lighter, as though the kingdom itself had exhaled after centuries of restraint. Wolves, once divided by rank and blood, now worked side by side to rebuild the keep. The broken walls were mended, the banners restored, and for the first time the moon shone not over a kingdom ruled by fear, but one shaped by choice. Elara walked through the courtyard as morning sunlight bled into gold across the stones. Every sound felt new, the laughter of the younger wolves, the rhythm of hammers striking iron, the soft murmur of peace taking root. It was fragile, she knew, but it was real. Lady Ceres approached, her calm composure returning after days of turmoil. The council has convened, she said. They've accepted the new decree, though not without resistance. Elder Corvin has resigned his seat. Elara nodded. It will take time for them to unlearn what they've believed for generations. Time and leadership, Ceres said. You've given them both. Elara's gaze drifted toward the balcony above, where Kyle stood overlooking the valley. His presence no longer cast the same weight it once did. He ruled differently now, no longer through command but through trust. She followed him up the steps, the scent of pine and ash lingering in the cool air. Kyle turned as she approached, his eyes reflecting the pale shimmer of morning. You're awake early, he said. I couldn't sleep, she replied. The silence feels strange without the threat of war. He smiled faintly. Peace always feels unnatural at first. They stood together watching the horizon where mist curled through the trees. The packs are restless, Kyle said. Freedom is a gift few know how to hold. Then we'll teach them, Ilara said, not by rule, but by example. Kyle studied her for a moment. You speak as though the crown belongs to you alone. She met his gaze evenly. It doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to those who bear its cost. His expression softened. You've changed everything, Ilara. The laws, the council, even me. She looked down at her hands, calloused from both battle and rebuilding. Change doesn't come from crowns or thrones. It comes from the courage to refuse them. He reached for her hand, his voice quiet. Then perhaps I should have refused mine. She shook her head. No, you chose differently, and choice, that's what makes us free. They stood in silence, the moment stretching between them. The bond they shared was no longer born of duty or law, but of something simpler, understanding. Later that afternoon, Ilara rode beyond the city walls, her path leading to the northern cliffs overlooking the ruins of Windvale. The wind was sharp, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant rain. She dismounted and walked to the edge, her boots pressing into the earth where her old life had ended. She knelt and placed a single moonflower in the soil. For my father, she whispered. For the girl who refused. The wind stirred the petals, scattering them across the rocks below. For a moment she thought she could hear his voice in the rustling leaves, steady, proud, free. When she stood, Kyle was there, having followed at a distance. You always find the places where silence speaks loudest, he said softly. It's where I listen best, she answered. He watched her for a long moment before speaking again. The world will tell stories of you, Ilara Thorne. The Luna who defied an alpha, the queen who changed the law. What will they say of me? She smiled faintly. They'll say you listened. He nodded, the weight of her words settling over him. As the sun began to set, Ilara looked once more toward the horizon. This is only the beginning, she said. Yes, Kyle replied, but it begins with you. She turned to him, her voice steady, her heart certain. No, it begins with us. And as the first stars appeared in the fading light, the queen of her own fate walked forward, not as a symbol, not as a ruler, but as a woman who had rewritten the destiny of wolves beneath the eternal watching moon. If Ilara's courage moved you, join her legacy. Subscribe and follow the next tale beneath the moon.